Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Frontenac Arch Biosphere's Go Green to Grow Your Business webinar. Ani bonjour, Indigenous Julie Bindigan. Bonjour et bienvenue à la webinaire Aller vers grossir votre entreprise. Merci de prendre le temps de participer I can't say it, avec nous aujourd'hui. That one's not rolling off the tongue this morning or this afternoon. I would like to start by acknowledging that the Frontenac Arch Biosphere is on land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. We recognize the historic and current relationships to the land, as well as the contributions from Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous peoples that have made for sharing their knowledge and culture. The Frontenac Arch Biosphere was established on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee and Algonquin Anishinaabe in 2002. Indigenous people have and continue to occupy this region as caretakers and knowledge holders, despite being displaced through acts of occupation, legislation, and environmental contamination. Our organization is grateful to operate on this land and to uphold connection with the land through our programs and through our vision to contribute to strengthening sustainable community development, celebrating the interconnectedness of nature, livelihood, well-being, and culture for this and future generations. We recognize that there are many languages spoken throughout the biosphere, including French, English, Anishinaabemowin, and Kanien'kehá:ka. We recognize the predominance of English used in this webinar, and FABN will actively seek opportunities to support language revitalization. I would now like to introduce Lindsay Dickey, a FABN board member who has spent the past 20 years honing her skills as a marketing and business strategist for both not-for-profit organizations and commercial businesses.
Thanks for the intro, Julie. It's super nice to see everyone here. I'm just gonna try to share screen. Bear with me 1 second. There we go. Okay. So as a UNESCO designated biosphere reserve, our goal is to support sustainable development in a way that benefits the community, the environment, and the local economy. After much planning, consulting with our partners, and securing funding, we are excited to announce to you officially for the first time, FAB Experiences, a new initiative designed to position the greater Frontenac Arch Biosphere region as a renowned sustainable tourism destination. So why sustainable tourism? Beyond the obvious reason that we're passionate about the environment at FAB, there's a growing trend towards consumers choosing more environmentally sustainable vacation options, and we want to help this region be at the forefront of it. In the latest sustainable travel report from Booking.com, 2021 survey results showed that 76% of Canadian travelers say that sustainable travel is important to them. 65% of them say they would be more likely to choose a sustainable accommodation, and over a third want to have a more locally relevant experience. Through the hard work of counties, municipalities, tourism organizations, and local businesses, this region already has so much to offer tourists. With all the great work already taking place here, and through leveraging the UNESCO designation of the biosphere, we think the greater FAB region has the potential to be Canada's new sustainable travel destination of choice. FAB Experiences will showcase all the amazing sustainable tourism offerings in the area, which encompasses the counties of Frontenac, Leeds, Grenville, and Lanark, under a single one-stop shop website. We'll also support businesses in becoming more sustainable through webinars and guest speakers sharing their knowledge, such as the amazing guest speakers we have here for you today. We want to make the greater Frontenac Arch region a household name, to amplify the great work each of you is already doing and package all of our offerings in order to draw a larger and broader audience from within the province, the county, and eventually beyond internationally. So to us, this is so much more than just a website. Our vision is actually one of destination development. So picture this. Travelers dreaming of coming here while sitting in their home or maybe in their office, planning their tour online. When they get here, they see branded highway signage welcoming them to this UNESCO area, QR code signage greets them at the trailheads and gives them easy access to trail maps and recommends sites of interest along the way, be it nature sites, lookouts, but also accommodations, restaurants, shops. And of course, local eco-conscious businesses showcase a commitment to sustainability on their websites and in their shop windows, helping discerning travelers make eco-conscious choices. Ultimately, our goal is to combine the great efforts of all of you in a way that benefits the whole region economically and environmentally. And so we'll achieve this through the new destination website, obviously. It'll launch this fall. fabexperience.ca will be a fully accessible one-stop shop website with mapping features and searchable, filterable listings, showcasing tourism offerings throughout the region and linking them together through land and water-based trails and routes promoting active transportation. I think this is the first time this has been done. The website will highlight rural tourism as well by featuring remote tourism offerings in route recommendations and by supporting offline use of the maps and GPS. And of course, at the heart of it all for FAB is conservation and sustainability. The program will provide local businesses with a comprehensive curriculum of webinars on sustainable tourism and training to adopt green practices in your day-to-day business. Finally, we'll offer businesses the opportunity to take a sustainability pledge, adding yet another layer of features and opportunities to promote your business. So some of you may be thinking, FAB experiences, that sounds maybe familiar. From 2012 to 2017, FABN published the FAB Experiences Guide. This is a print edition with over 30,000 copies distributed every year. And it was great. It broke the whole area into different sections, north, south, east, west, and Kingston, I believe. And within each of those areas, there was maps and trail guides and businesses along the way and telling people all the exciting things they could do in each area. So the new fabexperiences.ca online is basically just like a modernization of this whole concept, allowing us to reach a much, much bigger audience. But what will it look like today? So caveat here, we're still working with our graphic designers and our web designers on this, but I do have a little sneak peek for you. So picture travelers to the area landing on this beautiful image-heavy, video-heavy website that's going to really entice them to come to the area. We want to make sure we really showcase our UNESCO designation because it's just internationally recognized, and also it shows our commitment to sustainability. And most importantly, we want to make it really easy for guests of the area to plan their trip. So whether they're solo travelers or couples looking for a romantic getaway or families going on vacation, and whether they're into adventure tourism or arts and culture or foodieism, we will have tours and trails and recommendations for them featuring your businesses, as well as all of those active transportation routes. What about those who like to plan their own trips? Behind the scenes in all of this, our amazing partners at Wilfrid Laurier are plotting everything, all the trails across the region plotted in one place for the first time, as well as all the businesses, tourism related businesses obviously, will be pinned on a map that people can actually go in and look and search and find what they're looking for, maybe find things they didn't know about. And then of course we want to highlight things people might not have otherwise found. So on this website, you'll also find a lot of content that will be featuring businesses, new things that are going on in the 3 counties, new tours that we're highlighting on the website, and also an events calendar where you can add your events that are going on in the greater Frontenac Arch region. And of course, we couldn't do it at all without our partners. So we want to make sure we're sharing your contribution as well. Thank you to the counties of Frontenac and Lanark, as well as Wilfrid Laurier University, St. Lawrence Parks Commission, and Parks Canada, who have been supporting us since this was just an idea on paper way back when. One more thing, what will it look like when tourists are actually like on their phones, on site? Our partners at Wilfrid Laurier have been working on something really unique called story maps. So they're not just going to see a little map on their phone. They're going to see a beautiful description and photos of these tours. a little write-up of what they might find there. Of course, the trail difficulty, so they know what they're dealing with. And on these trails, they'll find points of interest that they can actually click on, read about, link directly to the business's website. It's a robust infrastructure and an exciting time to see all of this on one place with the trails and the businesses being linked for the first time. What will you see there at fabexperiences.ca now, though, is this. So after this webinar and after our amazing guest speakers, we do invite you to go to fabexperiences.ca. It's absolutely no commitment and no cost, but if you put in your business information here, this is how our partners at Wilfrid Laurier will find you to add you to the map, and also how you'll find out about all the great upcoming webinars we have for you, and everything else we have going on as we launch this in the fall. So that's it right now. I'll pass it back to Julie, but I hope to see you all on the website anytime after this webinar.
Thanks, Lindsay. I would like to introduce our next speaker. Please welcome Jonathan Tortolo. He's the founder and CEO of Destination Stewardship Center, who specializes in sustainable tourism and destination stewardship. Jonathan founded and ran National Geographic's Center for Sustainable Destinations for 9 years.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm going to try to share my screen now, and we'll see if this works as I hope it might. What are you seeing right now?
Looks good, Jonathan.
Yep, title pages looks great.
Okay. We will get started then. We're starting a little late, so I may skip over a couple of parts of this fairly quickly. But if anybody wants to stop me or speed me up, feel free to intervene and do that. I'll show you real quickly. This is how I spend my time, the Destination Stewardship Center, and increasingly importantly, I'm getting a bleep. There we go. The Destination Stewardship Report. And my hope is I'm going to see the Greater Frontenac area in here in short order. We'll go through some basics here. What is a destination? It's a place. And it is simply a place with a tourism element added. And that can be very important or not at all important, depending on the place. But what I'll be talking about is a destination stewardship, which is taking care of that place and its intersection with tourism. I'm having a little problem here with my advance. Let me see what's going on. There we go. Two faces of tourism. You're probably all familiar with this. And obviously, we want to deal with tourism that has as little as possible of the left side of this list and as much as possible of the right. And this is a common adage about tourism. And of course, we want to cook our food. Seeing the whole picture is important, and it requires recognizing the different ways that tourism and tourists can interact with the place and the people who live there. Some time ago, 20 years, I think, we introduced this concept via National Geographic, and I'd like you to pay particular attention to the definition. It sustains or enhances, either one, the geographical character of a place, and that embraces all the other things you see there, including, of course, your own well-being. Now, the way this should work is what you could call the holistic tourism virtuous circle, where you've got some place-based assets, the people, the nature, the scenery, and so on. And if everything's working as it should, tourists are coming and spending money, and the community is benefiting from it. And that gives everybody a motive to protect. what the tourists are coming to see and take care of it so they will continue to come to see it. It's pretty simple. This was the basic principle of ecotourism over 40 years ago, but it doesn't always work. In fact, it frequently doesn't work. The first connection won't work if the money's going somewhere else, that's leakage, or if the businesses are irresponsible, or if the taxes, particularly bed taxes for hotel stays, is misspent. And of course, if there's crowding, that's over tourism. We're familiar with that. Then the community may be benefiting, but not know it, or not pay much attention to it because for various reasons, or it may be inequitable. Yeah, sure, that guy over there is making a lot of money from tourism. What good does that do me? And then even if the community is motivated to protect all these special assets of the place, there may be obstacles to doing so, financial, legal, political, etc. And that happens very often. So this circle takes a lot of tending to make it work right. Here's what happens when the house burns down. This, of course, was a famous case of over-tourism in Barcelona a few years ago. And one of the common things that was said at that time in Barcelona was, no one's in charge here. And that's part of what was going wrong. I'm going to come back to that. For sustainable tourism to work well, we have to pay attention to quantity versus quality. And there are certain forces that keep pushing for quantity, and we need to make sure we're pushing for quality, and perhaps you might say appropriateness. To ensure sustained and beneficial demand, we need to plan for who are the best tourists to be here. And more is better is what generally underwrites tourism ministries around the world. That's what they're looking for. And sometimes they should be. But it might be better to think in terms of better tourism is better. And that might include some more tourists, or might include fewer tourists. And what it should certainly include is what do they do and who's benefiting. I want to show you this rather intimidating diagram just briefly. This was Stanley Plog came up with this many, many years ago, but I like it because this is a kind of picture of the range of tourism demand out there. And all tourists are not the same. And Plog posited that it went from the venturers on the left to what he called the dependables on the right. The venturers being the ones who love to discover a brand new place and be the first ones there. And the parochials are the ones that want it to be just like home, only better weather. And Plog's genius was to realize that word of mouth went only one way. The adventurers would inform the people almost as adventurous, would inform those that were moderately so, and so on, all the way across to the right. But it never went the other way, because no adventurous person is going to go to a place who's been assured by the parochials, don't worry, it's got a Tim Hortons just like home. And that's the main criterion. Plog also advised against waiting for getting the maximum number of tourists. A mature destination, word mature is used for a fruit right before it begins to rot. And there's a lag effect. So it's a dangerous place to aim for. What he recommended for destinations, for most of you listening, is to aim for this part of the curve. For people that are likely to be there because they have a sincere interest in the place, where there's enough of them to have a good infrastructure for tourism and hotels and bed and breakfast and restaurants and nice things for them to do without it overwhelming the place. National Geographic Traveler, where I used to work, collected these comments from their readers, and no surprise, these are the sort of tourists that would almost certainly fit into that part of Plog's diagram. Now, who do you think would want to come to a water park? Probably the people on the right hand of his diagram, recreational tourists who are not there because they're interested in the place. And this one is in Crete. The mountains of Crete, the island of Crete is full of tradition and special cuisine and scenery. It's got everything going for it. And they went and put a water park in the middle of it. This is kind of like putting a hot dog stand in the middle of a 2-star restaurant, not focusing on which tourists would be a good fit. So to become a sustainable place, we need to look at what is sustainable tourism. And this is the definition of the Tourism Industry Association of Canada. Sorry, it's a good definition. I like it. Gary, you must have written this. I'm not sure. But the point I want to make is being green is a start, and biking and recycling are important, certainly, but it's not enough. There's more to sustainability than that. Beginning with nature itself, it pays to sustain nature, and that can enhance the appeal of destination to the sort of tourists you're interested in. And on top of that, nature tourism is still growing. This study was done by U.S. Fish and Wildlife a few years ago. And what's interesting about it was that the richer the households, the more they enjoyed watching birds while they were on holiday. And that's a lot of potential tourists just on that one aspect of nature. So it's nice to know that you've got some good local habitats there and plenty more to provide appeal for ecotourism. But sustaining history is part of the picture too. And that too can enhance destination appeal. Here's an example from the Azores, a church built of volcanic rock. And it's not just that it's an interesting historic church, but the people who built it are also part of the story and important to hear. We got to see the old stone mill in your area when we were visiting back in 2013. God, that's a long time ago. And a good storytelling there as well. And this fellow, if you've ever been to Twillingate in Newfoundland, you may have met him. He runs a private museum, and he's got these people looking rapt basically at a man cleaning a fish. And the reason is he is a terrific storyteller. And one of your resources there is anybody who's good at telling great stories, and preferably honest and true ones. Sustaining the scenery, I'll breeze through this really quickly because it should be obvious, but sustainability, people often don't talk about it. This is what the world looks like more and more, even Japan. I was surprised. And here's a good case of billboard pollution, and look what they're advertising. We should not be seeing eco on ugly billboards. So there's a basic choice here in everything you do with destination development. Do you want tourists and visitors to remember this or remember this? Pretty simple. And now getting into the complicated and really interesting stuff is culture and everything that goes into culture, including, of course, human beings. Sense of place is an important thing to keep not only track of, but to build on. This looks like an ancient structure. It's actually a brand new hotel in the New Valley of Egypt, but they designed it so that it fit in very well. It's a nice job. Excuse me. The Parachicos dance in Chiapas, Mexico, has become recognized by UNESCO as intangible heritage. And you've got some intangible heritages right there in the FAB region, particularly with First Nations and also Second Nations. Businesses can support both of these. And here's an example from a big hotel chain, the Intercontinental Hotels and Resorts. And whoever came up with this slogan for their Responsible Business Week got it spot on, because they recognize that the product is not really the hotel. The product is the place you're coming to see. The hotel is the facilitator, as are the tour operations and so on. So for local people to benefit is key. That's what creates an incentive to protect all these things. In this case, her little sign says, "Welcome tourist friends," quite different from Barcelona. They're getting something out of it. And Whitefish is pretty blunt about it, puts it right on their real estate tax bill. Here's what tourism is saving you. That would be from those bed taxes. And engaging enterprises in all of this can be both sustainable and really interesting, kind of exciting, I think. Here's a modest example from your area, but when a tourist comes and bites into the apple, she will love the apple. And that's just the beginning of creating a memorable experience. A thank you to my wife for doing that. Here's an idea from St. Simon's Island off the coast of Georgia, and one I strongly recommend because it works well going both directions. And this is a default donation. If you dine in this restaurant, you will pay a 1% donation unless you explicitly ask not to. And guess which way produces more donations? It's a good system. Getting back to innovation, adaptive reuse is pretty good. That is now a restaurant itself in Curacao using an old airplane fuselage. Memorable. And here's one from New Mexico that I like showing because it's inventive and it costs almost nothing. Chimayo is on the high road in northern New Mexico, an area where tequila is no surprise a tradition, but they're surrounded by apple orchards. And they came up with the Chimayo cocktail, mixing cider with tequila and a bunch of spices, and it tasted so good it got noticed by the Wall Street Journal, and now people will make a trip to Chimayo just to sample the famous cocktail. Be inventive. Fogo Island, many of you are probably familiar with this. Excuse me. And with the Fogo Island Inn, which has become rather famous now. But here's a couple of other aspects of it that I thought were good lessons for any destination. Looking at the heritage of the fishing stages there, they came up with the idea of artist retreats, built with the same stilts, but looking, of course, very different, but paying homage to the heritage. And these places, I understand, are booked up constantly. And from boat building skills, the same set of skills, the same people wielding them can build modern furniture and sell it to tourists. Good setup, and still in keeping with the character of the place. Now, how do we put a value on character of place? Policymakers often think it's a matter of dollars and cents. That's what politicians ride on, and it isn't. And this is really difficult pattern of thinking to break. And we need leadership from places like yours to begin breaking it. I consider that there's three economic fallacies that leads them astray, and you see it everywhere, all over the world. One is the assumption that tourism is like any other industry. Well, it isn't. It sells something that it neither owns nor makes, and that's your place and you living in it. That's what is being sold. That is not the same as manufacturing auto parts, for instance. And the industry is the service that facilitates these visits, or back in the Azores here. The growth fallacy, and this is fascinating. I've read an excellent book about it by a Financial Times reporter, so he knows whereof he speaks. But what it boils down to basically is that you cannot keep fitting infinitely growing numbers of tourists into finite places. And this to and fro goes all the time. Here's Ireland's Cliffs of Moher. And if you haven't been there, they're very cliffy. And that makes them very popular. So what happened there was that the geopark managers were getting worried that they were getting too many tourists and put in a proposal to raise the parking fee on tour coaches. And who pushed back? The County Clare Council. They wanted more tourists. Now, this has been kind of worked out between the two sides, but you see this kind of dynamic all the time where the stewardship people want to keep some control over what's happening, and the government is constantly pushing for it. At the same time, this was going on in Ireland on the opposite side of the world. The same thing was happening in Tasmania, with the national park stewards pushing for better control and the premier of that state pushing for, no, we need more tourists. Very common. And then we have the accounting fallacy, and this is in some ways maybe the biggest of all. Albert Einstein is supposed to have said this. I don't know whether he did, but it's a great saying. Not all that counts can be counted. Not all that can be counted counts. And that is why economic metrics can't be the sole measure of success. And Simon Kuznets, a man I had never heard of until a couple of years ago, won the Nobel for inventing the idea of a gross national product and a domestic national product. But he warned not to depend on that as the whole story. What happens? That's exactly what governments depend on. But in fact, tourism depends on many things that come for free. And these are called externalities in economic speak. Basically, your hotel room that you pay for, that is part of the industry. That counts. The view outside the window of a beautiful scene, that comes for free. Doesn't show up on the spreadsheet. Doesn't count. That's a real problem in how we think about places. So what are some of the indicators of success we should have in mind? Here's a bunch of them, and some of them are countable and some of them are not, but you can always count by asking people. And that's one way to get a measure on it. I'm going to use the cliffs back to back or front to front here to bring home this point. I call it the Kuznets perception gap in his honor. And that is, on the one side, you have what is normally considered the industry, and that's all these elements that are either dealing with transactions or working to create more transactions. Even building a new highway or a new airport, that's to get more transactions. And on the other side, we have the destination stewards. That includes most of you probably. And you'll see that these are all the groups that are trying to take care of the different parts of the place, including the tourism businesses that depend on it. If you're an eco-tour operator, you've got to have some eco to tour. And the difficulty is these two sides often do not talk to each other. They don't even think the other side is pertinent in some cases. And this is a change in paradigm on the way we think that is really necessary now, particularly as we begin coming back from COVID, and we've got over-tourism lurking in the background. So to do this, we need to figure out how to do the job together, and that requires collaboration. DMO, if you're not familiar with it, that abbreviation means one of two things: destination marketing organization or a destination management organization. And that evolution is underway right now. The challenge is to design a cooperative structure that is right for you. And here's a quick digression on DMOs. The traditional idea that we'll do nothing but sell the place is now beginning, and I think we're farther ahead in Canada than we are down in the US, to realize that the community is part of the picture. And I hope they'll soon realize that history, nature, and culture are also part of the picture. But we're making progress. And this is, even where this is happening, it can't be left to the DMO alone. So who's in charge, as they were asking in Barcelona? Well, this is one way to begin dealing with it. GSTC, if you're not familiar with it, is probably the best thing we've got to an international agreement on what sustainable tourism is. And they've got a bunch of criteria for destinations, of which the very first is A1. And you'll see we aren't being terribly prescriptive about the way you set it up. It could be any of these things. but it needs to involve private, public, and civil society, and it needs to cover economic, culture, and environmental issues. And generically, we can call this a Destination Stewardship Council. And in the case of, I think, the Biosphere Network, you got a great start going. Here's a theoretical approach about how to do it. And notice the three-way membership, and that's important because if any one of the thirds changes, particularly the government, the other 2/3 will provide continuity until the new government or new whatever it is can fit in. Here's a real life example from the Columbia Gorge Tourism Alliance that's shared by Oregon and Washington in the US. Looks very much like our theoretical diagram. And an important point here is they have a network manager. That's a paid position. So they have to have a way to pay that person. But in most cases where we are looking at how these councils develop, the successful ones end up figuring out how to have at least one staff person. And look what's happened in Barcelona. When the house burned down, it took down the government with it. And the new way of doing things there is to break that dichotomy. That's the Kuznets gap again, separating tourism from the rest of the city. No, we're not going to do that. They are all combined and they have a council. Yes, indeed. Open, diverse, participatory, looking at what kind of tourism suits the city best. It's a great presentation from what was a real trouble spot. I'm going to end with a matter of destination identity, and bringing a heightened sense of place is important. Developing a real awareness of what your place is all about. And you can do this by asking yourselves these questions. And if you do this in a systematic way, it's one step toward building or widening a council. Figure out who we are, who we want to be, and begin to build a brand. And I hate using brand with places because it sounds so commercial, but this is the commercial side of things. And you want a brand that appeals to the people you want to have come. And now as a travel editor, I have to bring up this question, and my apologies because I've done it there before. But what is the name? If it is Greater Frontenac Arch Biosphere Region, that does not come trippingly off the tongue or fit into a headline. And that can hurt your marketing. And it can even hurt your awareness of who you are. But it's a tough job to figure out what might be the right one. I just threw out these ideas. What's the matter with Frontenac Arch? Speaking as a travel editor from south of the border, if you're not familiar with it, and most people aren't, you picture either a magnificent bridge or possibly the portico to a famous hotel in Quebec City. That's not what it is, of course, and that's its real name. We can't do anything about that. But there may be ways to package your reason or pick a name that everybody likes, or at least 51% of the people like. And one idea would be to hold a contest and try it out. And just doing that itself would build awareness, even if you don't come up with a name you can all agree on. Last thing is how branding can merge into certification, and you're in a great place to begin thinking this way. There's certification schemes in various parts of the world. Iceland has one. They got their idea from New Zealand. And down in Chiapas, there where the Parachicos were, they have Marca Chiapas, which is a system for everything from honey to hotels that is made in Chiapas and is authentically Chiapas, can get the mark. And if it's a green mark, it's sustainable on top of that. They've been running this now for 12 years, seems to be working well. And Slovenia, of course, has built a huge reputation on its sustainability, and everything I've just said, they're doing all of it. They're a model to look at. So here's a couple of profiles we've done in the Destination Stewardship Report. You can see them on the center website. And as I said at the beginning, I want to see your area, the Greater Frontenac Arch Biosphere Region, in one of these headlines, or maybe something shorter. And that's all. You can reach me at this address, email address.
So now we're going to
And,
welcome Bob Willard. He's the author of 7 books and is a leading expert on quantifying and selling the business value of corporate sustainability strategies. Bob applies his business and leadership experience to engage the business community for smart environmental, social, and governance practices. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to this for a couple of reasons, actually. One of them is in the upper right-hand corner of this screen. That's a view from our cottage. And our cottage is just a little northwest of the upper point of the region, the biosphere region. It's on Eagle Lake, and you include Titchburn, which is just on the edge of Eagle Lake. But the lake itself is not in the Frontenac Arch. So we're a wannabe participant in this. But a lot of the issues that, that Jonathan went over are very relevant to cottage life on that kind of lake, because a lot of us as cottagers descend in that area in the summer, take full advantage of all of the amenities of nature as well as the local area. And then we take off, we go somewhere else. So that's good. And it's got other challenges as well. The fishing is fantastic as long as you don't overfish and so on. So the usual kinds of challenges. So what I'm going to talk about is a little bit about the business side of all of this. If you were a local business, wondering about what it means to be more sustainable, more green, is that a good idea? What's in it for you if you were to do that? So normally when we talk about these kinds of issues, we've got 2 questions. How do we assess how green or sustainable we already are? So if someone says, what makes you a green business? We can reply with a little bit more detail than perhaps we are comfortable with right now. And the second part is, if we wanted to do more to allow ourselves to be identified as a sustainable business, whatever that means, what are some projects that would move us in that direction? So let's start with the first one. What's a green business? How does it identify itself compared to other businesses? I'd like to start with just an overview of sort of a generic business model of how a business impacts the nests within which it is immersed. Society, which is the community, of course, and the environment. And what you see here are 5 impact points. Any business, whether you're a retail store or a restaurant, or even a bed and breakfast, or a camp, you take things in from the environment, either directly or indirectly. You do something with them, with your employees. In the process of doing that, you impact your employees, how you treat them, how well you pay them, how you look after them, and so on. And your operation may itself impact the environment as well as the local community. And you produce goods and services, which your customers are going to do something with. And hopefully the operation of those is going to be relatively benign from an impact point of view. And when they're finished with them, it would be kind of good if they used a circular economy approach and made sure that they didn't end up in a landfill, but were brought into either your input stream again, or recycled by being useful to somebody else as their raw input. So what we're looking at are 5 impact points. 3 of them are environmental, 2 of them are related to people. So when we talk about people and planet impacts, normally we're talking about how an organization is treating the local community as well as the environment. You'll notice that over the top of all of this, there is purpose and governance. Purpose drives governance, governance drives everything. It's what you're doing and why you're doing it. and the care with which you accomplish your business objectives. So when we are trying to assess how sustainable are you, we're looking at how you're doing on those impact points. And specifically, there are these things that we normally look for in terms of how sustainable you are. What are the nature of the materials and the supplies that you bring into the organization? Where did they come from? What are they made of? All of those kinds of things. How much energy and water are you bringing in? Are you doing that responsibly? How do you treat your employees? Not only how much you pay them, but how you look after them and make sure that they're not hurt by doing the job that you're asking them to do. You're also trying to look at the impacts that you might be having on the environment from your own operation, especially these days, greenhouse gas emissions and other emissions, waste, which is a huge issue, especially single-use plastics, and encroachment. And encroachment covers all the things that you would hope that it would. It's not only encroachment on biodiversity, sensitive kinds of areas or ecosystems, but it's also encroachment on culturally sensitive areas. So making sure that you're doing the right kind of stewardship of those kinds of resources. Those impacts on the environment happen both in terms of your own operation as well as the operation of your products and the end of use or end of life disposal of them. And then we talk about your impacts on the community, how you treat the community, and whether you pay your taxes, all that kind of stuff as well. So when we think of companies producing a sustainability report, for example, usually what we're looking for is how they're doing on those things, including what their purpose is and governance is. So you may feel especially proud of a couple of things that you're doing, maybe on the energy side, maybe on the waste side, maybe on the encroachment side, or how you treat your employees. And that's fantastic. What I'm suggesting here is that people who are interested in sustainability or green businesses may be poking at other things or have expectations about other things as well. And you need to be aware that perhaps some of these things are things that they are interested in knowing more about in terms of your operation. There are good frameworks out there for companies to report on all of this stuff and do calculations and metrics and key performance indicators and so on. But most of those are for large companies, large corporations. Unfortunately, most companies on the planet are not big. And in fact, in Canada, small and medium-sized enterprises make up by far the majority. In fact, they make up 99.8% of the companies in Canada have 500 employees or less. And if you drop that down to 100 employees or less, it's about 98%. In the US, it's 98.1. In Europe, it's about 98%. In Latin America, it's a little bit higher. Most of the companies on the planet are small. They're small companies. They don't have normally sustainability expertise on staff. They're just trying to run a business. So if we ask them, how sustainable are you? They might be a little challenged with answering that with the current frameworks for assessing that kind of thing. So what I've created is a tool. It's a free open source tool, which allows any small company, if you're so inclined, to do a self-assessment of how sustainable you are relative to those things that we just looked at. It's only 20 multiple choice questions. It covers all of the things that you'd hope it would cover. It's based on some of the best benchmarks out there. It compares where you are to where you need to be in order to have science-based goals associated with those 18 things that we saw on the previous diagram. Gives you credit for doing some positive things, both socially and environmentally, educational as well. So it's a tool that may be of value to you if you wanted to just do a quick assessment of how you're doing on the things that we just looked at. So it covers all those things and it shows your score on them out of 100% as to how close you are to not causing any harm on that issue from an energy, water, supplies point of view, greenhouse gases, etc. So it expresses all of those as a percent. gives you bonus points for positive impacts that they're having on environment and on society and people. And it gives you an overall score. So if you wanted to get a baseline as to how you're doing, this might be a tool that's helpful. If you're interested in how you're doing on contributing to the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, some of you may have heard of those. The SDGs, they were announced by the UN Global Compact quite a few years ago. 17 things, which are a really, really good blueprint for the kind of society that we aspire to as quickly as we can get to it everywhere. Covers all the right bases. We can sort those into environmental and people-related kinds of things. The color coding and the and the numbering of these things, I have never been able to quite figure out, but I'm sure that somebody understands all of that. But we can take the various SDGs. Some of them are quite environmentally related, the ones that have to do with water and energy and climate and life below water and on land and so on. Environmental related goals and social goals, some of which we can deal with in how we treat our employees and others in how we treat our community. So we can take those scores. We can take those scores that I was showing you before, those percent scores, and automatically generate scores for the things that are related to them that are in the SDG community. So we have these scores, and the tool that I was referring to, the basic sustainability assessment tool, automatically gives you scores on how you're doing on all of the SDGs based on your scores on those other things that we just looked at. So it allows you to express how you're doing on those things in terms of how you're doing on the SDGs. So that this tool is for your use if you want to use it. Feel free, it's generic, it's intended to be small and medium-sized enterprise friendly. It gives you bonus points for positive impacts. There's an Excel version, free, downloadable anytime you want from my website. And there's an online version as well. So that's how you might be able to answer this question. How do we assess how green and sustainable we already are? That tool may help you answer that question. Then you come into the question of, okay, so if I'm not scoring too well on something, on energy or greenhouse gases or how I treat my employees, how do we justify projects that would help us be better on those things? And this gets into how you justify doing any project. So as some of you that run businesses probably understand, there may be an opportunity for you to improve in areas that are relative to green tourism interests. So for example, on energy and greenhouse gases, you might want to transition to renewable energy, install heat pumps rather than using natural gas. You might use hydrogen for some transportation, especially for trucks and other heavy vehicles. Or you might provide charging for electric vehicles that are being used by tourists, eco-tourists, to get to your location. And while they're hiking on the trails or taking advantage of some of the other amenities that are available, they can be recharging their vehicle. So having those kinds of things there are kind of important. For example, when I go to the cottage up on Eagle Lake, there is no place I can recharge my electric vehicle. So I actually borrow a hybrid vehicle to get there and back because I can't get there and get back with my electric vehicle, my Leaf. From the point of view of supplies, if you're a restaurant, you might think of local organic food, local artisans, social enterprises. So who are you getting your supplies from and what are the nature of those supplies? Thinking of waste issues that might be of an issue there. And also from an encroachment point of view, how are you using land, protecting it, restoring it, cultural sites and historic and nature programs. Of course, you've got camps, you've got trails, so that's all important too. So as you take a look at this, there may be ways in which you can improve your scores in areas that are specifically related to green tourism. So how do you justify any project? Well, normally what you look at is this helping us fulfill our purpose as an organization? Is this why we're here? Does this resonate with our values? Is it going to help us capture some of these opportunities or avoid these risks? So that's what you normally look for. When you're justifying any kind of project in a business, whether it's big or small, doesn't matter. For the last 50 to 100 years, this is the kind of form that is normally used. It may be on paper, it may be electronic, but it's normally called a capital expenditure. That means to say you're going to spend capital money on some project. So what you want to know is, what is the project? Is it going to help you save money or generate more revenue? Are there risks associated with it or risks associated with not doing it? How much money do you need? Where are you getting it from? And then you come to some calculations on payback period, internal rate of return, net present value, all that kind of stuff. So there's a tool that I've got which gives you a master list of all of the potential benefits from a sustainability related project, how it could help you fulfill your purpose, generate revenue, save money, get your employees excited and more productive, and avoid some risks as well. It's called the Sustainability ROI Workbook, and it's an electronic version of that and includes things in each of these areas that might not normally be thought of, but helps you have a master list of things that you might want to include in there. So when you're doing an assessment of how much this project is going to cost, and are there better ways of spending your money than this, or other ways of spending this amount of money, you can start to compare, okay, if I did this, or I did this, or I did this, how does this all work out in terms of taking a look at the justification for that project? So there's a way to appraise the project. And normally the way financial people in your finance department, or your CFO, or whoever's looking after your books, looks at this, they assign a weight to each of those areas. It's not just on the financial part. It's not 100% on that. It may also have to do with risks being avoided, assign a weight to opportunities arising from the project, or whether this thing just makes sense for who you are and what you care about. Maybe this is worth 20, 30, 40% of the weight, and maybe this is worth 10 or 20%, and this is worth maybe 10%, and maybe this is worth 40 to 50%. The point of this is that it's not just the money part, it's whether or not this makes sense for who you are, what you're trying to do. What you do is you look at multiple projects, project A, project B, project C. Maybe one project's working on energy, maybe one's working on waste, maybe another one's working on greenhouse gases. And you score those projects as to how well they are doing on each of those things. You give a weighted score, weight times the score, and you come up with the one that gets the best weighted score is the one that gets the money. So it's a business decision. If it doesn't make sense, don't do it. If it does, do it. And very often, this is the do it anyway factor. This is where you may decide that you're going to do this because it's just a smart thing to do. This is who you are, and this is what you care about, and that's why you're doing it. So it gives you an opportunity to ensure that that is part of the decision. So you've got some tools, and that's a free open source tool as well, the Sustainability ROI Workbook. It's an Excel spreadsheet and guides you through all of that with a lot of prompts and so on. So you've got some tools that help you, if you're inclined, to assess how green and sustainable you already are, identify areas that you may want to improve, justify those projects, and get on with it. Question?
Introduce Sage Musgrove. She's a master's student from Queen's University, studying sustainable rural tourism and food system sustainability. In partnership with FabN, Sage is currently working on a sustainable tourism development research project in the Frontenac Arch Biosphere, which will support our project, the Fab Experiences project.
Hi, my name is Sage Musgrove. I am a master's student at Queen's, and I've, like Julie said, partnered with the Frontenac Arch Biosphere Network to work on a project that is really just aiming to support the development of sustainable tourism in the biosphere region and Tri-County area. And I wanted to talk about some upcoming participatory workshops that I'm going to be hosting in the next month or two, so in this coming fall. So I'm planning 3 upcoming asset mapping workshops where I'm really just aiming to gain some community insights into what the community's understanding of the natural or built or social assets and attributes and features that exist within the biosphere are, just trying to understand and scope out what the region's foundational, I guess, capacity to support sustainable tourism development already is. And then a second objective of these workshops is also going to be just trying to gain a better understanding of community goals in terms of stewardship and in terms of development and opportunities and barriers for sustainable tourism in the biosphere region. So I'm planning the first workshop will be upcoming on October 6th, and it'll be happening in South Frontenac. It's going to be held on, I think the 6th is a Thursday, and it's from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And I believe the invites for this workshop are going to be going out through the Frontenac Arch Biosphere Network. We're also going to host a second workshop upcoming on the 12th of October, I believe, and that one's going to take place more closer to Thousand Islands area, so kind of the other side of the biosphere. And then we're also going to host a third asset mapping workshop virtually for anyone who can't come out and participate in person. And generally, the workshops are just going to consist of some asset mapping activities with paper maps and pens and sticky notes, and then just some general community discussions to gain insights. So I look forward to hopefully having more discussions about sustainable tourism development with folks here. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Sage. So I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you so much for attending. And as a reminder, I'm going to put a link in the chat to the Fab Experiences landing page where you can register your business if you so choose. And we kind of lost some folks, but the first 30 tourism business to register will have the opportunity to have our professional photographer do photo shoots for use on the Fab Experiences website. So bonus. And yeah, that's it. That wraps us up. Thank you everyone for coming and hanging in there for an hour and a half.
Thank you to Bob and Jonathan. It was wonderful having you both and to see you again.
Well, thank you for letting us be here. I learned a lot, and the next time I want to be there physically.